Well, hello and welcome to Griffith University's virtual open house for Griffith Law School. So my name is Therese Wilson. I'm the Dean of Law and Head of School at Griffith Law School, and I'm delighted that joining me in this session to talk to you and tell you a little bit about their career journeys are two of our remarkable alumni from Griffith Law School, Tim Ellis, who's now a partner in a law firm in London, who's joining us from the lovely Isle of Skye in Scotland, where he's just finishing off a holiday, and Zara Shafrudin, who's a senior associate with Jones Day in Singapore, who's a little bit more restricted in her movements at the moment, I gather, in Singapore. But I'm just delighted to be able to catch up with Tim and Zara and for them to have an opportunity to share with you a little bit about their experiences and their journey and what it's like to work internationally as well. Now, this is a live session and your questions are very welcome. There is a Q&A box you'll see at the bottom, and feel free to type your questions in and we'll come to those questions at the end of the discussion. So I'll be asking Tim and Zara to initially talk a little bit about themselves, their time studying at Griffith and what they've done since. I'll then ask them some questions and then move to the questions that you might have. So the other thing that you can always do, and we can do after this session, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday during the open house period, there is a live chat that you can go to, that you can click onto and ask questions then as well. And certainly for more information about Griffith Law School, please visit the law booth in the study areas hall of the Griffith virtual open house site that you've hopefully had an opportunity to look around before you came into this virtual auditorium. But without further ado, I would like to welcome and properly introduce to you two fabulous Griffith Law School alumni who both actually had an opportunity while they were students to travel overseas as part of their degree and participate in an international mooting competition and represent the law school in that competition. Tim Ellis and Zara Shafrudin. So welcome, Tim and Zara. So I'll get you to unmute, both of you, the one thing that we all forget to do on Zoom. And I might start with you actually, Zara, joining us from Singapore. If you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about, I guess, the degree program that you enrolled in and undertook at Griffith, and a little bit about your journey from when you graduated to where you are now.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure to reconnect with you, Therese and Tim, and to all of you joining us. So my story started back in 2005 when I joined the Griffith Law School. I started in a Bachelor of Law and Bachelor of Commerce degree, and I spent 5 fruitful years at the law school there trying to learn as much as possible about this thing we call the practice of law and watch on various TV shows. And I graduated in 2010 after having spent 5 years doing all sorts of courses, including some very theoretical courses. But as Therese said, I was very fortunate to be able to represent the law school in an international mooting competition in Vienna, and also got to travel to Hong Kong as well. So that was a lot of fun. It's challenging, but I think I'm better for it now. And so the week I graduated in 2010, I then moved very quickly to Sydney, as my fiance at the time had taken a job there. I joined Clayton Utts' Sydney office in their international arbitration team, working with one of Australia's leading arbitrators. I was there for a few years and then decided to try my hand at the international market and ended up in Singapore. First with a UK firm called Freshfields, and now with a US firm called Jones Day. And I sit in Jones Day's global disputes practice, which is by its very definition completely international, which has been a lot of fun. And I would say most of the work I do day to day involves international arbitration cases, which if you join the law school, you'll soon learn all about in terms of it being a way of resolving disputes outside of courts. But in addition to that, the rest of my docket is a bit of cross-border litigation and some investigatory work. So it's certainly a lot of variety.
Fantastic. Thanks, Zara, for that. Tim, can you tell us a little bit about the degree you did at Griffith and your journey, I guess, after graduating?
Yeah, of course. And apologies to all for going black. As soon as this started, someone started a whippersnapper right next to me, so I had to move. But yeah, so my story is relatively similar to Zara's in that I started at Griffith I think about 2002, and then graduated at the end of 2007. And I also got to do the Biz Moot, which was a fantastic experience where we prepared for a mock international arbitration and then competed amongst, I think at the time I did it, there was about 180 or so teams from all around the world, and met people from all those places as well in Vienna. And I also had the opportunity to travel and to Korea for a work placement with LG Electronics, and then study at a university in Japan for 6 months. So Griffith was fantastic for me in terms of allowing me to get out and see different places of the world and get that type of experience while at university. All of which helped me to get a very good job off the back of that. And I started at one of the major Australian law firms in Brisbane, a firm called alumni, and worked there for about 4 years before moving to London. And I've been here really since then. And I work at a firm called Inyo Law. We're a litigation specialist firm that does similar work to the type of work that Zara described. So it's international commercial litigation and arbitration. And it's fascinating. And we work with people from all over the world. Most of our cases involve some kind of geopolitical element. We're involved in disputes with the state of Ukraine. We are involved in disputes acting on behalf of the state of Libya in the wake of the Gaddafi regime, and London as a place of litigation and arbitration is fantastic. You do get all those types of cases. It is a very international place to work. All of my colleagues are international. All of my cases are international, and I get to travel very regularly for work. And it's just great. And obviously, with COVID, I can travel and work like I'm doing at the moment.
I have to remember to unmute. Sorry, fantastic. This is probably a bit of a leading question, and it's obvious what I'd like you to say, but I want you to be honest. Do you think there was anything about your experiences while you're at Griffith that led you at least to have in mind the type of career you might have that involved international legal practice?
For me, yes. I mean, it's what I wanted to do anyway, but I think having the opportunity to do international study and then participate in the Biz Moot made that a whole lot easier. It helped me get in the door when I was having job applications, and then having a initial job that had been international as well just opens it all up. I think once you're in, it's quite easy to move about, but it's not the easiest field to get into in the first place.
Yeah, and so what have been the highlights for you, Tim, in terms of your career so far, would you say?
Career highlights, interesting. I think really just the breadth of cases that we get to work on, and some of them, as I said before, are quite fascinating. I'm working on a case at the moment where we act for two of the richest people in the Ukraine in a dispute with the state of the Ukraine, which initially started because my client's business partner funded the Ukrainian East's defense of the Russian incursion into Ukraine in 2013, 2014. which caused him to fall out with the state of Russia and also fall out with the state of Ukraine because he had been then seen to be participating in politics. And so we're now conducting litigation throughout the world for this individual, where we've got cases in London, there's arbitration, there is litigation in Delaware, there's litigation in Israel, there's litigation in Malta. And it is obviously very, very, very hard fought. And it's completely fascinating. So I think in terms of the work side of it, it's probably that. But I think otherwise, it's just having the opportunity to progress quite quickly to where you are. Where I'm now in the process of where I manage, obviously, the firm. I manage other lawyers, and you are the decision maker on some of these big, very interesting cases.
That's fabulous. Sarah, what have been the highlights for you? And I note that you studied for a while in New York as well, which would have been fun.
I think it really did all start at Griffith. I think when I first started my law degree at Nathan campus, I had a very different idea of where I thought I want my life to go and what I wanted to do to contribute to the world. And I think the thing at Griffith that really changed things for me was the vast subject offerings, which exposed me and my cohort to a number of things that I just never really thought about. And this mooting competition that both Tim and I participated in completely changed my trajectory. So that was a very notable shift for me. And then in terms of where I went after that, you're right, I ended up in New York with the help of yourself, Therese, as one of my referees. And I always had great support from the Griffith lecturers and teaching staff there in encouraging me to pursue things abroad. Lived in New York, which was fun. It was the year of the 2016 election, and it was really quite an interesting time to be there. And aside from studying law further and developing in that regard, getting to immerse yourself in another culture and the political regime there, which was fun. And I suppose other highlights. So one of the benefits of working, for example, for an international firm is I've been able to work in a number of our different offices around the world, including in London, Paris, and in Saudi Arabia. So in terms of career highlights, I never thought I would end up somewhere where you would just get to flavor what the practice of law and also what it's like living in all these different places. So that's been quite fun.
And so when you started, Zara, you said it, you never thought you'd end up doing what you were doing. Was working internationally at all on your radar?
No, not at all. I had grown up in a small country called Brunei, of which there were 400,000 people in total. I had moved from Brunei to Brisbane for university, and I thought Brisbane's a lovely city, but to me, it was quite daunting moving from such a small country to a city of just over 2 million at the time. And it had, Brisbane has everything to offer, and I had a lovely life there, and I have family there now. So when I started, I never really thought to look anywhere else, and I was quite happy there. And as we speak now, I will confess, one day I will certainly come back to Australia, and Brisbane is on the top of my list.
And so what have been some of the main challenges for you in terms of working overseas, do you think? I mean, you've said it all sounds very exciting and glamorous. Is there anything that you would want to impart in terms of advice or tips for anyone thinking that that's where they would like their career to take them?
Yes, absolutely. I know it sounds glamorous and it sounds like an episode from Suits or Harvey Specter jetting around the world, but I don't think I would have ended up where I am if I wasn't open to continuously learning. And so if you're interested in working abroad, learning about that legal framework and culture in the place that you want to go and the law you want to practice, it was, of course, there was a very steep and continuing learning curve, but there are plenty of opportunities to learn. And so aside from doing, say, further studies like a master's in law, I then also did further qualifications. So I'm admitted now in England and Wales and also in New York, which were challenging, and I wouldn't recommend you take these things lightly, but getting more and more qualifications and really opens a lot of doors. And in terms of how that exposes you to more international work, once you get these accreditations, you'll find that a lot more opportunities and doors just open to you. So you never know where these things will lead.
So take every opportunity is the message that I'm hearing there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, a lot of young Australians want to go and work in London for a while. It's almost a common kind of rite of passage for many young Australian lawyers. What would your advice be to students thinking that that's what they might want to be doing?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to do if you get the opportunity, and I think there are plenty of opportunities to do it. It really depends what field you want to do it in, but if you do want to go into international commercial legal practice, then I think the key starting point is to have a good base in Australia, and that means a good job at a known law firm. Obviously, there are other ways there, and that's not the only way, but it certainly does make it a whole lot easier when you come over. Australian lawyers are very, very well regarded in the UK, and I'm sure in other places in the world. And so if you have that background from Australia and you time it right, generally you need about probably 4 to 5 years of practice in Australia before it becomes easy to move. Then the move is relatively straightforward. There are recruiters that come out from the UK to London. They come out from the UK to Australia to recruit. There are otherwise it's all done online, but it's pretty straightforward, and they sort everything out for you. I mean, London is very similar. The UK is very similar to Australia, so it's not difficult to get settled in once you do, and you'll find that half your friends from university or from other places are already there. So it's relatively straightforward. I mean, there are other places to go, as Zara has done: Singapore, New York, Hong Kong. There are the offshore jurisdictions, the Caribbean, the Channel Islands. All of those places are relatively easily accessed by Australians with a good law degree. Sorry.
I think you're on mute.
Yeah.
I need to stop doing that. Both you and Zara, Tim, have followed large commercial disputes practices, essentially, which have taken you overseas. I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of law, think of the things that are most obvious in the media, like criminal law, for example, or family law, and perhaps envision that commercial law might be a little bit boring. I wonder if you could talk about the really interesting parts of practicing commercial law, particularly internationally.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had any experience I've had limited experience in criminal law where it is linked to my commercial cases. I've had zero experience in family law. It may be that they are more exciting. Personally, I wouldn't like to do either of them. I think it's enough stress dealing with people's money, let alone their lives or their families. But I think certainly international litigation is very interesting. Some of the other aspects of commercial law, obviously, some people do find them very interesting. Personally, I'm not sure that I would. But international litigation, I think someone explained it to me once as in every case you do, you need to become as good as an expert in that particular area. So every time I get a new case, I have to learn an industry or a particular aspect of an industry inside out. And I think, and the way it was explained to me is it's kind of like a bathtub, and it fills all the way up to the top right before you have the trial. And then whilst it will always empty out, you'll always have that detritus around the top that will never disappear. And as I said before, I mean, a lot of our cases involve geopolitical aspects. I mean, I sat with a guy taking a witness statement from him, who had been there during perestroika in the fall of the Soviet Union, and was one of the I guess they call them the oligarchs that took advantage of that to make tens of billions of pounds and become an oligarch. And that type of stuff, to sit in the room with these people and have them tell you their stories personally, you just don't get that opportunity anywhere else in any other field. And I find it just fascinating. And again, you don't really get that opportunity in criminal or family law either, albeit in this particular case, I'm also dealing with criminal aspects of this individual.
We're hearing the lovely seagulls on the Isle of Skye. It's gorgeous.
Well, at least the whippersniffering has stopped. The seagulls are better than the whippersniffering.
Sarah, we've got a question that's come up in the Q&A box about mooting, which obviously I could answer as well, but it might be nice if you wouldn't mind answering it. Just talking about what mooting is and whether people can do it as part of their degree, and the answer to that is yes. But do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with mooting as a student?
Absolutely. So mooting is essentially pretend court, where you're given a set of facts. The facts will speak to a particular legal issue, and then you'll be assigned a side, whether you're like the plaintiff or the claimant arguing for something, or you're the defendant or respondent trying to defend yourself against this claim. And so it's very much like you get your 5 minutes of time to shine, just like in a normal TV show when you see people rock up to court. So it's a lot of fun, because in order for you to prepare for a moot, there are a number of stages. First of all, you need to figure out what's going on, which can be a little harder than what some might otherwise think. And then you go and do a lot of research into what the issue is and what the legal issues or laws and rules are around that issue. And then you get to identify, okay, so how do my set of facts sit together with this rule? Do they apply? Do they not apply? I found a case, this seems to be relevant. Is this helpful for me, or is this going to hurt my position? So you get to do this quite interesting analysis about this problem in a very safe space. And then you get to present your arguments in moot court in front of a decision maker. And often that'll, in the context of a class, I often had three judges hearing arguments, including Therese would sometimes sit as judge. And actually, on occasion, we had real judges from the Queensland Supreme Court or other courts in Queensland come and listen to arguments. And one of the highlights of the Griffith Law School experience, and I've commented about this with other friends of mine who went to other law schools in Australia at the time, is that at Griffith, we got to do a lot of moots. I was doing a moot at least once a year. And I think that really helps you develop your practical argumentation, both in written and in oral, in terms of oral advocacy, in a much more practical way. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, when you're in a moot competition, there will be a winner. If you're doing it in a course, there might be a winner, there might not be, but really the fun of it is in developing the argument and learning how better to portray that argument. So it was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Zara. I certainly couldn't have explained that better myself. And I think too, it's interesting to note that you will do it as part of your assessment at Griffith. So in courses as well, as Zara said, you might have a moot, because it's actually a really good way to test your knowledge. There's no bluffing. You're on your feet answering questions. You just have to know your stuff. So it's a really good way to make sure that you really understand quite thoroughly a particular area of law. And for those of you who joined us at 4 o'clock, we did show a demonstration moot at 4 o'clock. And the video of that demonstration moot is still available in the auditorium in the virtual open house. So do go and have a look at that if you're interested in that. And there's another question here about whether our degree is balanced between theory and practical or only theory. So I guess it's about whether you have opportunities to do practical learning. And I can also answer that talking about our clinics program, but it would be nice for one of our alumni to maybe talk about their experience with clinics. So I don't know, Tim or Zara, did you do clinics when you were at law school?
I don't think I did do one, unfortunately. I think the closest I got was the moot. But my experience from speaking to others who, at least at the time I went to university, Griffith had far more practical elements to its studies than they did at their university. And again, I don't know whether it's changed since then, but certainly that was my experience at the time.
Yeah, so we do have a really extensive clinical legal education program, lots of opportunities to go and work in community legal centres or do what's called a trimester in practice, where you can basically choose what you do. You can work with a barrister, you can work with a law firm, you can go and do an internship in government. We've had some international internships in Hong Kong, and we're looking at trying them in London and Singapore once this COVID goes away. Zara, did you have any sort of those kind of practical legal experiences as part of your degree?
Unfortunately not. I didn't get to partake in any of the clinics. However, my brother, who was also an alumni of the Griffith Law School, he did the semester in practice and he loved it. So it was recommended to him by one of our other lecturers. Because he was at a stage of his degree where he was really, I think it's fair to say he felt a little lost about what he wanted to do and he just wasn't sure about direction. But he did this course on the recommendation of a lecturer, and he got assigned to a very senior barrister in Queensland who not only became a great mentor, but also he just learned so much from it. And having not had, so my brother didn't partake in the summer clerkship programs with law firms in the summer periods, but having that sense of what it was like day to day was quite eye-opening for him. And he has since gone on to roles quite similar to what he experienced when working with the barrister. So yeah, my mother often comments about that course, saying that course was a real life changer for my brother.
Fantastic. Yeah, and often those internships or those trimester in practice experiences open doors to mentorships and just having networks with members of the profession, and that's something we really try and foster at the law school. So there's a couple of questions about how could a degree, in this case a graduate entry degree or any LLB, take you into international commercial law. And I guess it's a good point. I wonder if, Tim, you might comment on it, that it's not necessary to have a degree in international commercial law. You just have a law degree and then you go and you get that experience essentially, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. And I think you need a law degree to get you into a law firm that does international commercial practice. And now those law firms, obviously, if you show an interest in doing international work through the choices you've made at university, then that will help you, but it's definitely not a prerequisite.
And another question is, Zara, how did you know what area of law you wanted to go into? But I guess, and I'll pass to you now, but lots of people don't know what area of law they want to go into. It kind of emerges, doesn't it? It's an evolving thing often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think until my final year, so 4 years in, I really thought I was going to finish my degree and become an M&A, mergers and acquisitions, transactional lawyer, because I really liked, those sorts of contractual work and the idea of doing big deals. And then I did it just maybe not quite out of the blue. I was encouraged to do it. And I had friends do it. And Tim was one of my predecessors for the moot, so I'd seen him do it. and good things seem to come of it. And so I thought, well, why don't I give this a go? And that just changed my entire trajectory. I learned about different aspects of disputes work. So things like jurisdictional arguments about, can I even be here in this in this court? Am I allowed to bring this claim or not? To substantive issues like, do I have a breach of contract claim? Can I get damages for this? So it's very different work. And coming out of that moot competition, I then applied for jobs in that space, which is a niche area in Australia, but it's getting better slowly. But so I never really, I had hoped for the best and was lucky enough to end up working for someone in that space. And then, yeah, the rest is history. I often reflect and wonder if you know, how different my life would be if I never did the moot. Would I, you know, I would be more, you know, more a transactional lawyer, and how would I, how would that have changed my path? But I'm pretty happy with where I am.
Yeah. And you never know what other opportunities might have come up. But I always say that certainly my whole career has been one big accident. Like nothing was ever planned. It was just, oh, that looks interesting. Oh, here's another opportunity. And I think it's just about taking each opportunity as it comes and having a go, giving it a bit of a go. Did you want to add anything on that point, Tim, in terms of having to have a clear idea of where you wanted to go when you started law?
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't have either. I mean, certainly not so far as to know what particular field of law or commercial law I ultimately wanted to do. And quite often you don't need to make a decision on that until you have actually commenced practice. If you choose general commercial, if you want to do commercial law, once you get into a commercial law firm, you'll be given the opportunity to work in a number of practice areas before you specialize in a particular practice area. And it's really until you do that and you really understand what people in that field do day to day that you can make an informed decision on what you do. Otherwise, you're really just guessing.
Yeah, I think that's right. So there's an interesting question about the fact that you're working overseas in different legal systems and how that works, because so many Australians and so many Griffith Law School graduates are all over the world working. So how does a law degree from Australia enable you to go and work in other countries? Perhaps if you could each just talk a little bit about the processes. So maybe, Tim, if you want to start talking about working in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, you do not need immediately to requalify to practice in an English law firm with an Australian law degree. Unless you want to be a partner, you don't have to have an English law qualification. Now, I did get one when shortly after I arrived, and you go through a process called the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Scheme. And that's a multiple choice exam on basically all aspects of English law, which was quite difficult, followed by a series of practical exams. And it takes all up somewhere with probably about 6 months to do, following which you get admitted as an English lawyer. And I think in terms of the substance of it, English law obviously is very similar to Australian law, and insofar as it's not the same logical approach is generally applied. So even though you don't know the answer, you after your education, you should know how to find the answer, at least as a matter of English law. I mean, I guess the other thing to say is when a lot of my cases aren't actually English law either. A lot of my cases are foreign law, and we work with foreign lawyers in order to have them tell us what the law is in their particular jurisdiction, and we arrange and argue the case on behalf of the client. So it's yeah. The short answer is it helps you to get there, but you do not. It's the education of how to apply it that's most important, rather than the substance of the law.
Yeah, I think that's right. You're never going to remember every piece of law you learned over your whole degree, but you learn how to find it and understand it, basically. So it's those skills. Zara, working in Singapore.
Yeah, so it's a little different in Singapore because you need to be, as an expatriate, you need to be registered here as a foreign attorney, which typically means you need to be already admitted in your home jurisdiction. So I always tell a lot of young budding Australian lawyers as they leave law school is, why don't you do a year or two in Australia first, hone your foundational practice skills, and then look to going abroad. At least that worked for me. I have met a few people who left a bit sooner or much later, so there are different routes to going abroad. But in terms of how an Australian degree helps you get to places like Singapore or London or New York, a common denominator in those three jurisdictions is they're all common law jurisdictions. So I find that law firms in those cities, in New York and London and Singapore, think quite favorably of Australian law schools. Griffith is a great law school as well. It's reputable. So I come across people, they know exactly the law school I went to. So that always helps. And actually a lot of employers, and this has been remarked to me in an interview once before, they love Australians because we're so hardworking, because we have to work really hard to get anywhere, to go and travel. You need to jump on a plane and be willing to travel for 8 hours, or if you want to work abroad, we really need to uproot ourselves and experience a new life elsewhere. So I think Australians are generally regarded quite well by foreign employers, and certainly coming from a school like Griffith Law School, you would be well placed.
Thanks, Sarah. And there's just one more question before we finish off, which is really about for people who don't actually want to practice law. So it's probably not one that either of you can personally comment on, because you have practiced law with your law degree. Although we all know our friend, former student Eamon Atkinson, who's now in New York as a film producer. That's where his law degree took him. I don't know if any of you have seen his recent award-winning film, Steelers. You should look at it. Anyway, so have either of you had an experience with any of your peers who've gone on to do quite different things, including internationally, from their law degree? Maybe start with you, Zara.
Yes, I would say most of my cohort either initially or eventually transitioned out of your traditional private practice roles or even in-house roles, and have been doing, have been exploring the business world, entrepreneurship, or even diplomacy. So a shining example is in the year ahead of me, there was one of my friends. Her name is Lauren Dancer. She's a Rhodes Scholar, and she went off to Oxford and studied for a few years, and then she went off and worked for a non-for-profit organization in Timor-Leste, and has now ended up in DFAT, posted in India, not practicing as a lawyer, but working on policy and foreign affairs. So at the moment, doing her utmost best to help people get out of India, to save us Australians. So I often catch up with her, and she has absolutely no regrets. She's enjoyed the path she's pursued, and she's often trying to convince the rest of us stuck in private practice to join her in public policy.
Yeah, that's right. Law is one of those degrees that can lead you into a range of policy related areas as well as strict legal practice. Tim, any examples you can think of?
Yeah, I've got a similar experience. A lot of my friends who started in law are now in different fields. One of my good friends is a sort of senior compliance executive at one of the major banks in Australia. I've got another friend who is in Sri Lanka for DFAT as a diplomat. I'm trying to think who else. Plenty of, and then plenty of people obviously just in business and who have gone, as Zara has said, from starting with a legal role in a particular business and now in a commercial role. So it's a full gamut. And I think probably almost more people who start law probably ultimately do go on to do something else than those who stay in it for good. And that's because it does just open up so many opportunities for you.
Fantastic. Well, look, I just want to thank you both so much, Zara and Tim. It's lovely to catch up with you virtually. Hopefully we'll be able to we did have some alumni events that we squeezed in Singapore and London in November last year when I got to see you both. But yes, that's not going to be happening for a little while, alas. We got it in just before COVID, I think. But really nice to see you both. Congratulations on what you've been able to achieve. And thank you so much for your generosity, like so many of our alumni who are keen to stay in contact with our students and the school and provide support where you can. You guys are fantastic. So really appreciate your time and hope to see you in person before too long.
And thanks very much for having us, Therese.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Zara.
Thank you.
Here.
Bye.
Bye. So I'll just tell everyone this video is available again to view on demand within the auditorium. There are the live chat sessions from 4 to 6 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. You can go into the open house site and have a look around the study hall areas. There's lots of interesting content for you to have a look at. And if you want to chat to one of our study advisors between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday, you can call 1800 677 728. So that concludes this demonstration. The live chat is still open for another 20 minutes if anyone wants to go in there and ask questions. Thanks once again, Zara and Tim, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Take care.